Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webinar, Building and Organizing Your Family Archive. I am Daniel Fraser, Library Conservator at the Preservation and Conservation Laboratory, Heritage Library Division, NALIS. We ask you to keep your mics muted and your cameras off, but you are invited to type your questions into the chat for the question and answer segment at the end of the webinar. Let me introduce our organization. The National Library and Information System Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, NALIS, is the country's coordinator of all library and information services. Beyond the Heritage Library, there are over 25 public libraries, 3 libraries and correctional institutions, libraries in secondary and primary schools, and special libraries in several government agencies, all administered by NALIS. Please visit our website, www.nalis.gov.tt, for more information about our services. We'll post a link in the chat of this webinar. Now, one of NALIS's key responsibilities is to promote and preserve national heritage information. And the Heritage Library Division, located on the 2nd floor of the National Library Building, Port of Spain, helps NALIS fulfill the goal of acquiring, promoting, and preserving national heritage information. Special collections acquired or donated to the Heritage Library Division consist of mainly traditional library items created by or of interest to a significant person or organization of Trinidad and Tobago. I invite you to follow the Heritage Library Division on Facebook at NALIS HLDTT. See the link in the chat. The Preservation and Conservation Laboratory is responsible for ensuring the overall longevity of library materials with attention to the Heritage Library Division and its collections of significant historical importance. The PAC Lab, which was officially commissioned in 2013, helps NALIS fulfill the role of the International Federation of Library Association and Institutions, Preservation and Conservation, or IFLA PAC, Regional Center for the English-Speaking Caribbean. NALIS is a part of a network of 16 IFLA PAC centers around the globe with the aim of providing knowledge and expert advice on preservation, conservation practices within the region, as well as to serve as IFLA's key area of work on safeguarding and promoting culture and heritage. We've continued our mission of raising awareness of preservation and conservation issues through our preservation webinar series. In case you missed any of our previous webinars, our previous seasons of the series, the link to the NALIS YouTube playlist is posted in the chat for you to catch up. Now, this webinar is a part of a series of activities to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the commissioning of the Preservation and Conservation Lab. Our activities also include in-person workshops and family heirloom preservation clinics at public libraries throughout the NALIS system. The link for more information about PAC Lab Turns 10 anniversary celebration will be pasted in the chat. And I hope you will continue celebrating with us and follow the hashtag on our social media channels. Now, let me introduce our facilitator, Gerada Holder. Gerada's qualifications include a BA and an MA in history from the University of the West Indies at St. Augustine, an MLIS or Masters in Library and Information Studies with a specialization in preservation management from the University of Pittsburgh, and a postgraduate diploma in instructional design from UWI Open Campus, and a postgraduate diploma in business administration from Heriot-Watt University. Gerada has been a librarian at NALIS from 2004 to present, with a break when she headed the records unit at the Judiciary of Trinidad and Tobago from 2015 to 2021. She is currently the Librarian IV and head of the Collection Management Unit of the Heritage Library Division. She has worked steadily as an adjunct faculty at the College of Science, Technology and Applied Art of Trinidad and Tobago, otherwise known as COSTAT, from 2005 to present. There she lectures the Introduction to Records Management and the Introduction to Archive Management courses. So we know that Gerada is the perfect person to tell us about building and organizing our family archives for generations to come. I am so excited to host my dear colleague. So over to you, Gerada.
Welcome everyone to Building and Organizing Your Family Archive. I'm Gerada Holder, Librarian IV at the Heritage Library Division with responsibility for the collection. I hope that you enjoyed the information, and if there are any questions, we will have a question and answer segment at the end of the presentation. Many of us have items that come to us from our parents or grandparents or extended family members. We may even have items that we will want to pass on to our children or grandchildren, a favorite niece or nephew, or other family members. Items that are treasures to us, our families, things that we don't want to get lost. Today's webinar is an introduction to creating, building, and organizing your family archive. We will be exploring what is an archive and suggestions of different items that can be included in your own family archives. The important thing to remember is that these items are only suggestions and that you will know what is important to your family, and that, of course, will dictate the items that you will collect. I will provide general guidelines for organizing your archive, and we will explore the uses for which family archives can be utilized. I will also share with you images of a small family archive that I recently started working with. So let's get started. So, what is an archive? Archives are those records that are worthy of being kept permanently because they have enduring value, can be used for research, and can provide evidence, especially in a court of law. They are records that we keep coming back to because the information that they provide are always relevant to the context of why they were created, and that is why they have enduring value. Enduring value is a term that we apply to a document when the information that it contains is always relevant. Always relevant, regardless of the age of the document. Archives are records that can enable the past to be reconstructed and recreated. And when these records are put together, they become an archival collection. When we apply this term to your family and any family collection, then of course it becomes a family archive. And that is because these archival records are built around an individual family. In this and in the next slide, I've provided examples of documents that should be included in any family archive. These documents, they track important legal events, provide information for genealogical purposes, and in some instances, like the passport, national identification card, and the driver's permit, they include the additional bonus of having an image of the individual. I also included religious documents because these documents can often be overlooked. In many instances, because of how our history developed, these documents are often used by genealogists to track family histories. The Catholic, Anglican, and Presbyterian churches hold excellent records from a time when legal documents may not have been exacting in its recording information. These are more examples of documents that should be included in any family archive. Legal documents, such as those pertaining to properties, are particularly important as they hold information on ownership, which can be important in a family dispute. I will discuss funeral programs in a slide of its own. Diaries, letters, and postcards with writing are traditionally historically significant, as they are what are commonly referred to first-hand accounts of the topic being discussed. These accounts draw us directly into the minds, thoughts, and feelings of the authors. And of course, it is always interesting to know what life was like for those coming before us. Photographs are a snapshot in time. They tell us about people, places, objects, and events. We can derive not only what persons look like, but the fashion, the decor, and the art from that particular era. Photographs record the details of everyday life that are not captured in any written record, or would include details that persons may not even consider important enough to take note of. I want to draw your attention to the last bullet, health reports. In Trinidad and Tobago, and I think the entire Caribbean, there's a sensitivity about making health issues public. And today we see an increase in many diseases that are hereditary. And we are unaware that that particular disease may be present in our own gene pool. By including these reports in our family archive, we can make family members aware that they may be at risk for certain diseases. I would like to share a personal example with you. Okay? One of my nieces was born with sickle cell anemia. And because my family was unaware that this disease even existed, and none of us were aware that any of our ancestors who had it, we of course blamed her father. No, we blamed her father. When a second niece was born with this disease, we realized that it was present in our own gene pool. That health issue is now part of our family history. And each individual within our family are always advised to get tested. As a result, I make a case to you for included in any family archive health reports of any issue that you think are relevant. We can also include memorabilia. Yes, memorabilia in our family archives. Memorabilia may include locks of hair, items of clothing, pieces of jewelry, awards, awards from persons who would have gone before us, persons who are here with us. These are more common examples of memorabilia. One tradition that has been adopted is keeping a lock of hair as a keepsake. Parents have done so for their children, especially that first haircut of a male child, and of course, a deceased family member. It is a form of remembrance. Items of clothing, especially from special occasions, for example, a wedding dress, baptism clothing for babies, are also traditional keepsake. And in fact, recently, we saw Princess Beatrice of Britain, the granddaughter of the late Queen Elizabeth, using one of her grandmother's dress from 1962 as her own wedding dress. When one of our favorite relatives die, many persons keep a favorite piece of clothing as a keepsake. I know I did for my mother when she passed. In the East Indian community, jewelry is always an important part of their culture, particularly at Hindu weddings. and many pieces of jewelry are passed from generation to generation as an heirloom. Awards are also a prime example of what should be included in your family archive. These can take the form of plaques, trophies, certificates, and any other item that you think is significant enough to be remembered. This list continues with suggestions of more memorabilia that can be included in a family archive. Household items, especially those that were handmade by female members, maybe even those created for your trousseau, can be handed down from mother to daughter. I want, I want to mention one important form of memorabilia that many family members from a particular generation would identify with, and that is the family Bible. The family Bible would usually record births, deaths, and other important information about family members. We would have spoken about funeral programs in slide 5 as examples of documents that should be included in your family archive. This is an example that I would have pulled from the genealogical collection at the Heritage Library Division. It's an example of a typical funeral program. And while you may not think that a funeral program is an exciting item worthy of being kept as a treasured item in your family archive, funeral programs tell a wonderful story of any family. It provides information on family members, immediate and extended or deceased. And this is important not only for acknowledging family members and close friends of the deceased, but because funeral programs provide invaluable information that may be lost as time passes. An example of this kind of information is that in Trinidad and Tobago, we have a tradition of having a home name, a legal name, and even abbreviated version of our names and what we may call a nickname. Okay? Many persons outside our immediate family, and sometimes even those in our extended family, may only know us by these non-legal names. And it is generally in a funeral program that both names are included. So your funeral program provides information about all the different names that the deceased would have been known by. And of course, in any funeral program, there's also images of the deceased so that we always have an idea what the individual would have looked like. Funeral programs, because they provide a wealth of information, become a snapshot of family relations for that time. They are gold mines for genealogical research. And I urge you to keep copies of each and every deceased family member and close friends. I want to share with you a family archive that I recently started working on. This is the family archive of a friend of mine, and this adventure really started as part of a regular visit that she did to her family home. Her immediate family is deceased, and generally the house is empty, but she visits it very often. And on this particular occasion, when I accompanied her, we immediately started documenting the house. Now, as with all houses of a particular age, it shows its wear and tear. But this house is a testament to the history of the family, to local architecture, and what I see as a type of life, a way of life that is slowly disappearing. So I invite you to look at the slides and to use it as an example of what can be done with your family archive. So this is our ancestral home. It gives you an idea of what a home looks like. And this would set the tone for what we will see inside the house. Okay? This is where the adventure begins. Many of us, our parents, our grandparents, have albums with photographs. Photographs that are printed, not digital photographs. These photographs document life's journeys. And so it was with the Babulal family photographs. As you can see, they were stored in a cupboard in an environment that we all assume is safe. And this is something that we all do. We have treasured items always in one particular location because that is always the location that this item is placed in. And it continues to be there until something happens. And we realize that we could have made better storage choices. So we looked at the storage area and we removed the albums. When we removed these albums, we looked at it, we went through it, we looked for signs of deterioration, we looked at it for signs of any pests, and once we were assured that there was no sign of deterioration, there was no sign of anything adverse happening to the photographs, we removed it to a safer location. After we secured the family photo albums, we looked at other types of memorabilia that were stored at the house. One of the things that we found was my friend Charmaine's deceased brother items from his police uniform. These again are treasured items. Not only do these items bring memories, pleasant memories back, but these items, his police badge number, his his name plate, will be items that tell of his profession, his identification, and of course, they provide information on the evolution of the police services dress code for its officers. This kind of personal memorabilia are extremely important to be held within your family archive. After that, we started photographing the family home. Okay? Our physical structure is something that we take for granted. So in the next few slides, we're going to be detailing the physical structure that the family lived in. This home at some time in the future will be demolished to make way for another structure. And when that happens, the information of what it would have looked like would be lost. These photographs will capture the physical structure before it only becomes memories. This is the kitchen, another part of the structure. And this is another room in the house. And as we go along in the presentation, in one of the later slides, we'll have an analysis of the architectural work of the that is held within the house. Again, this is the bedroom. And in this slide, Charmaine, Charmaine talks about a tradition that is held within her family. Let's listen.
So this is a sill, and as far as I remember, and I may be wrong, this is a loha, right? And it should be more rounded and better than this. But what the old people would do is my grandmother would put the spices here, the garlic and the onion and shadow benny and all the jeera and all the whole spices, whole grain spices, because you wouldn't get ground cumin and stuff like you get now. And she would just grind them here using the 2 stones and then put it in her pot and cook with that.
Many of the family routines of our grandparents and even our parents have changed. When we capture and we remember these lost practices, it tells us about the lives that they would have lived, their values, and what was important to the persons of that generation. This short case study of the Babulal family archive really illustrates for us the kind of material that we can gather for our archive. Remember that your family archive tells the story of your family. What was important to your family over the years and what continues to be important to your family. So we will continue to look at what uses your family archive can be utilized for. Yeah. These are examples on the slide of how we can use our family archives in the present and for our future offspring. The family archive aids in genealogical research as it can offer information to family members on those who have gone before us. In the process of collecting, processing, and taking care of the collection, you begin to understand those who would have died, and of course, those who are here. You understand your personal past and the possibilities for the future. This process of collecting, organizing, can bring a feeling of personal belonging, as there is now a greater level of respect and understanding for your family circle. And if there are any health considerations, and it doesn't necessarily have to be some sort of hereditary disease, but these can be included in your family archive, as it speaks to health patterns, common health patterns today that we always hear persons in the health sector talking about, like hypertension and obesity, or even male pattern baldness. Once you include this kind of information in your family archive, it brings a certain level of awareness of body issues that are sometimes located in a family. I just want you to know that when we have families taking care to have a family archive, when we collect all of this information, it shows a picture of our entire society. These are images that you all would have seen before from the Babulal family archive depicting the family home. But together, these images depict past design and construction methods that would have been used for houses. I would have encircled in yellow the areas that I want you to pay attention to. Okay, and this is a prime example of how family archives can be utilized to illustrate what is happening in the wider community. You know, these particular images show for us the evolution of architectural designs. In these three images, in the areas in yellow, it shows how in older houses that the builders would have incorporated ventilation measures to allow air and breeze to travel through the structure. In image 1 on the left, we have slates or wooden louvers, and on the right, you would see metal louvers. In the middle image, we can see fretwork divided the two rooms. And in the last image on the right, we see ventilation blocks and vertical slates. In a period where air conditioning was either too expensive or didn't exist, our predecessors had to find a method that worked for them. And these images are a prime example of what they would have used successfully. And unfortunately, with the destruction of older houses to make way for newer structures, examples of this kind of design, home design, architecture is now disappearing. Now that you have had that exciting adventure of seeking out different items to put in your family archive, the next thing that you will want to do is to organize it. And there are certain basic archival principles that you can keep in mind as you are organizing your collection. And these archival principles really apply to all archival collections, regardless of whether it's a huge institution or just your own little family archive. What we tend to do is that we keep like items together. So, for example, we'll keep all our printed items in one particular spot, and we'll have the photographs together, we'll have certificates together, we'll have legal documents together, and we'll have memorabilia together. So, like items together. And we do this simply because it is easier to store all photographs together rather than having your photographs and your memorabilia together, because they may damage each other. So you have like items together. The next principle that you need to keep in mind is not mixing collections from one person into the collections of another person. So an example of this is, let's say, keeping all the photographs from your grandmother, your grandparents in one part of the album, and collecting photographs from maybe cousins in another part of the album. And I know that maybe with photographs, because there are different people in the photographs, that might be a little difficult. So the next thing that you can look at when you're organizing memorabilia, then maybe you could organize it by occasion. So you may have all the photographs from a particular family occasion together, let's say a wedding, you will have items from that wedding in one particular location, and let's say items from a funeral in another album. So you can utilize, instead of having items from one family member, you could organize it by occasion. And those two archival principles of not mixing the collections and keeping like items together really go a long way in organizing your collection. And this applies to both physical and digital items. In fact, organizing your digital items may be a little easier. That way, you can have a folder on one particular occasion. So it's a little easier if you have a digital collection. But the main thing to keep in mind when you're organizing your family archive is not to mix your collections and keep like items together. What I also want to recommend is that as far as possible, you keep the context of your item, meaning that make a little note as to what this particular item, the significance of this particular item. That way, for generations to come, they will know the significance of this particular item. What I would also urge that you do, and this goes a long way in keeping the significance of the item, keeping the context of the item, is that you actually label the items. And this should be done for accurate identification. Sometimes we have an older photograph and we're looking at the persons in the photograph and we're not quite sure who is in the photograph, what was the occasion, and we're like, maybe this is cousin John Doe, or maybe that's Uncle John Doe, So once you label the items, it is easier to have accurate information and to keep the context of the item intact. Okay, memorabilia as well should also be tagged. And some of the recommendations that I would give for tagging any item is that you should include who owned the item, what was the year that it was acquired or created, and what was the significance of the items. That kind of information should always be included with the item, whether it's memorabilia, whether it is a photograph, because it just keeps the context, it keeps the meaning, it keeps the significance of the item always current. So in the next slide, I want to give you an example of how you can caption your photographs. In this particular image, we see the captions at the bottom of the photograph. This particular photograph, while it is not strictly a family archive type of image, the captions that you see at the bottom is applicable to all photographs. Doesn't matter whether it's digital, doesn't matter whether it's a hard copy photograph. This is the kind of information that you should include to keep the context of the photograph, the significance of the photograph. So at the bottom of this page, you have the photographer's name, At that time, the photographer in this image, the photographer is David McBurney. We have the date that the photograph was taken. We have the location. We have the description. So you know just by looking at the photograph exactly what is going on in the photograph. There's no ifs, there's no buts. We know the context, we know the date, we know the location. And these pieces of information really go a long way to supporting the authenticity of the image. It provides a context and you're informed about what is going on in the photograph. And I would always suggest that you include the photographer, whether it's a family member, whether it was done by a professional photographer. You ought to have the name of the person who is capturing the photograph. And that is because if there are any issues of copyright, you know the source. That is something that we tend to overlook, but photographer, copyright of the image is really, really important. Okay, so keep in mind, this is some of the basic information that you could include when you are captioning a photograph. And it doesn't matter whether it is a digital photograph or a physical photograph. I would want to suggest that you have an inventory. You know, an inventory it's a way of keeping track of the items that you're collecting. It allows you to know at a glance what is in your archive. And you may think, no, that's a technical thing. We don't need to do that. No, my collection is too small, you know. Nah, an inventory is not necessary for family archive. But I want to urge you to have that inventory. It doesn't need to be a technical involved thing. And an inventory is really important because we can misplace things. We can lose things. Family members can remove things and they can remove it without telling you. Okay. And of course, along the way, things get forgotten. So an inventory is a simple way of knowing what exists. And I suggest that in your inventory, you include how the items came into your possession, who would have owned it originally. Even if it is you, you know, you put that information. And again, to keep the context, if there are any family stories connected with that particular item, that particular heirloom, that particular memorabilia, you include it. And it doesn't matter how large or small your collection is, because usually what happens when a family, extended family, close family member realize that you are actively keeping items for your family archive, they tend to donate. So as your collection grows, additional items should be added to the inventory. In this slide, I'm showing you what a simple inventory form could look like. You know, it doesn't have to be involved, it doesn't have to be complicated. A simple inventory form could include what kind of item it is, who were the original owners, a brief description of what it is, and how the item came to be in the collection. So as you can see, this really shows that it does not have to be complicated. Okay, how do I start? I have information on what it is that I'm going to be collecting, how I'm going to be organizing it, how I'm going to be keeping track of it. How do I start? Okay, this is some general suggestions on the steps forward. Okay, examine your home, examine your parents' home, talk to your siblings, talk to extended family members, get them involved. Start gathering items that tell your family history. And as things expand, you could start adding particular items, things that you think are more worthy of being preserved, or you could start branching out in other things that tell your family history. Things besides those that I've listed in this presentation. You could also consider oral history interviews. I would have given you a small one when Charmaine was talking about how her grandmother would grind the seasonings. Small oral history interviews like that may be done on the spur of the moment, doesn't necessarily have to be long and involved. Those tell the story of your family traditions, what is important to your family. So create oral history interviews. And in this era of digital cameras, we are always taking photographs of family events, special occasions. You know, continue to do that. Continue to take those photographs, continue to take those videos, but ensure that you have copies, because sometimes we take the photograph, we take the video, and it's just there on our phones, and then afterwards the phone dies and we lose those treasured moments. So again, continue taking your photographs, taking your videos, but ensure that you have it in a particular location. Add it to your inventory to ensure that you know that it is there, that you have access to it. Okay? And organize your collection, organize it and make the effort to keep it safe. Okay? These are some of the really, really basic, enjoyable measures that you could utilize to start your family collection, to start your family archive. It would be really remiss of me not to include some of the family collections, some of the family archives that we have at the Heritage Library Division. The tree that I'm going to, give you a little bit of information about today is the Larry Constantine collection, the John Donaldson collection, and the Arthur L. Markshine collection. These three collections were assembled by family members and donated by family members to the Heritage Library Division. The Larry Constantine collection was donated by his daughter, Mrs. Gloria Valère, and Larry Constantine was a famous and successful cricketer. He was a statesman, he was a barrister, and today barristers are known as lawyers, but he was. He was also a widely respected advocate of racial equality in the British Empire. In 1954, he wrote the book Colour Bar, which discussed the race problem in Britain. He was also recognized for his work by the late Queen Elizabeth II with a knighthood in 1962. That knighthood meant that Larry Constantine became the first Black British peer, and in 1969 he was granted the title of Baron. Larry Constantine was also a politician, and he became the Minister of Works and Transport in that first PNM government in 1956. Larry Constantine collection is lodged at the Heritage Library Division. Again, it's a family archive. And learn a little more about Larry Constantine. The John Donaldson collection comprises of items from John Shelford Donaldson. You all may know the John Donaldson Institute that is now part of UTT. It was named after him. And John Stanley Donaldson, which was his son. Both John Donaldsons, Stanley and Shelford, were both well-known members of the PNM. John Donaldson Sr., John Shelford Donaldson, was a former Minister of Education, and he was the principal architect of the Concordat. John Stanley Donaldson was an ambassador, a diplomat, a public servant, and a teacher. And in fact, John Stanley's daughter, High Court Judge Eleanor Joy Donaldson, wrote a book called Sailor Dance, which paid tribute to her father and her grandfather. So you see right there that we can utilize information from our family archives to write books on our predecessors, our parents, our grandparents. You can utilize that information for publication. The last collection that I'm going to discuss is the Arthur L. Markshine collection. And I have a URL listed in the slide where you can get more information on Arthur L. Markshine. This collection was donated by his grandson, Arthur Hutton Markshine. Arthur L. Markshine, his grandfather, was the first doctor of ophthalmology in Trinidad and Tobago. He was also one of the first board members of the Trinidad Cooperative Bank, also known as the Penny Bank on Charlotte Street in Port of Spain. And that bank, the Penny Bank, was instrumental in developing low-cost housing in Belmont. And in fact, there's a lane in Belmont, Markshine Terrace, that is named after Arthur Markshine. So there's a street named after him in Belmont. Arthur L. Markshine was also a city councillor, a Port of Spain city councillor. He was a mayor and a deputy mayor. And what is significant, what is really, really significant about his political career is that he was one of the persons that championed the installation of piped water in Laventille in Port of Spain. And as you are leaving Port of Spain or coming into Port of Spain, you are always aware of those two large water tanks on Laventille Hill. You can't miss them. They're huge. The official name of those reservoirs, those water tanks, is the Markshine Reservoir. They were named after Arthur L. Markshine, who was one of the persons that championed having piped water in Laventille. So Mr. Markshine was really a significant person in the development of Trinidad and Tobago. All of these collections consist of items that speak to the lives of these men, their actions, and their accomplishments. Their families made a deliberate attempt to gather photographs, documents, and other memorabilia that is now housed at the Heritage Library Division. You can do the same. You can do the same to preserve your family's legacy by creating and growing your own family archive. So, I invite you to come to the Heritage Library and view any of the family archival collections that are housed here. Okay? So, we've come to the end. I want to thank everyone for attending this webinar. And I continue to urge you to at least consider creating your family archive or to contribute to one if one already exists. So I will now open the floor for the question and answer session. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Gerada. We have indeed learned so much through your brief presentation on building our family archives. Now, just before we get to questions, permit me to share just a little bit regarding our upcoming webinars. Just want to make a quick plug for this one on Wednesday. You mentioned textiles. You mentioned saving crochet doilies and wedding dresses and various things like that. And if we have to go about protecting those textiles in our collection, we'll need to understand how to go about safeguarding those items. So join us for our upcoming webinar on Wednesday, July 19th, where we will welcome Sarah Hamlin, Preventative Conservator, and Liz Rose, Textile Conservator from the British Library, as they provide guidelines for the protection of textiles in our collections. And we will also, on July 26th, have another webinar called Top 10 Tips for Water Disasters, where PACLAB staff will provide 10 pivotal tips for disaster preparedness, salvage, and recovery of collections. So be sure to register using the links that are provided in the chat. Now, tomorrow, there are still a few spots left for our in-person workshop, Paste Paper and Japanese Style Book Binding. This workshop is now priced at $100. So this will be a fun-filled day from 9 to 3 p.m. where you will learn the historic art of paste paper making. It's a technique where decorative papers are made using paste and acrylic paints. Then you would use your newly created paste paper to make a beautiful Japanese style book. So PACLAB staff will guide you through each step of the process to ensure that you leave with a stunning finished product. All materials will be provided. All you need to bring is your creativity and willingness to learn. And join us next week, Thursday, July 13th, for Save Our Stuff, SOS, Save Our Stuff. It's the introduction to the care and repair of books and documents. Learn how to take care of your books and documents to make them last longer. PACLAB staff will guide you through the basics of book and document repair so you can save those precious items from further damage. Do not miss this opportunity to learn more on how you can save your stuff. The links to register for both workshops, which are priced at $100 each, are in the chat. And Do you want one-on-one advice on how to care for your family treasures? Well, then join us at the remaining family heirloom preservation clinics, which are happening at libraries across Trinidad. Visit the link about celebrating our anniversary to learn more as to where our next location is. And thank you for listening. For me shamelessly plugging about our PAC turns 10 anniversary, I will allow for us to take questions now. So Gerada, there was a question earlier coming from Philip. He asks, can another be used when writing one's memoir, autobiography, or even biography? And I think when he said another, it might have been in reference to that portion where you were speaking on, I think, diaries, etc. Perhaps Philip can give some further explanation on that question. But with respect to writing memoirs and autobiographies and even biographies, I guess a family archive would be very resourceful for that.
Philip, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yes, can you guys hear me?
I'm barely hearing you.
Hold on. Okay.
Hearing you better.
Okay, thanks. Good morning, everyone. I thoroughly enjoyed your presentation. I asked the question when you were talking about the uses. So my question was, can another use of what this workshop was all about, if it could be that you could use these information for producing a memoir or an autobiography or even a biography?
Good question. You can use resources like this to do anything that you think is important for your family. And in fact, the Donaldson collection, some of the resources was utilized by the granddaughter to actually create the memoir, to create the tribute to her father and her grandfather. So yes, you can utilize the information from your family archive to create memoirs, to create publications, to create your funeral program. When you're creating any product based on your family, you can utilize these documents, these photographs to create that publication. So the short answer is yes, you can. Good question.
Thank you so much, Philip, for that question. And he says, thank you in the chat, Gerada. I had a couple of things that came up for me as we wait to see if there are any more questions coming to the chat. Again, I agree with Philip. I share his sentiment that this was such a wonderful session. Even though I'm a librarian and a library conservator at that, I still learned quite a lot through what you mentioned here. We have something coming up here. Arlene has said, I have been deemed the family's treasure chest. So I cannot begin to express how valuable this presentation has been to me. I thank you very much. Thank you so much, Arlene. Yes, Gerada, we know of folks who have been deemed, as she said, the family's treasure chest, the one person who cares about keeping all of these items that will go into the family archive, the things that are considered our family heirlooms. And so, yes, this information was so valuable. You mentioned in looking at the Babulal home, and thank you so much for taking us on that journey of building out this actual real family archive. With the Babulals, you mentioned, the storage choices that are made with respect to sometimes some of our albums, etc. And I just want to make a quick plug that we do have some webinars that have already been done on how to care for your photos, as well as storage and protective enclosures. So I encourage everyone to take a look at our preservation webinar series. We've broken down and given some details on information that will be really valuable, thinking about storing your family archive correctly. And again, just that aspect of unique stories, the awareness that it brings by having these stories stored and recorded. I like the fact that you mentioned separating and organizing our family archives. Philip, you mentioned that you are currently ghostwriting someone's memoir and making use of that person's family archives. Exactly. And we see the value of it being saved, of it being stored. And then now we see the value of even building and organizing it, putting those like things together with like things, making it easy for you to understand and remember which event things were related to. Separating materials is something of importance. We've seen that issue where we dealt with some time capsules in the past, where metal coins were in the same area as the newspapers that were put together in the time capsule. And so the metal coins corroded and caused further damage to the paper item itself. So it's so important that we think of separating out materials that are different, putting like items together with like items. That is a really major one. And you also mentioned labeling. One little plug about labeling. For photos in particularly, I know it's difficult to think of where do we write on a photo because we don't want to cause any further damage to it. Be sure that if you are writing on a photo that it's only on the back, on the reverse of the photo, not the image side. And you should be writing closer to the edge of the photo. We want to be sure that if you write with something that causes some damage down the road, that damage is not going to now come and bleed through and show through the image in of itself. Your best choice will actually be 2B pencils, as in a pencil. A pencil is a very permanent item once it's not erased. It doesn't bleed, it doesn't get washed out, etc. But if you do have to use a pen, be sure that it's a pen that is really and truly a permanent ink that does not bleed, it doesn't strike through, etc. Arlene, you say that while this can be very emotional journey, you believe that it can bring some closure and healing as well. So heartfelt thank you again. And that is so true. True, we have our ancestors who have gone on, who are no longer here with us. And so it can bring, like you say, that closure and that healing. I have a message coming directly from Clara Tidd. Just let me read it. She said that this was a very informative session. She's so sorry about all our keepsakes that were destroyed in ignorance. She will definitely go and take out photos from that old house, what is left. And she's the person, again, who's been assigned to take photos of all events and to keep them safe. And she's also trying to build a family tree. So she's seeing the value of those old photos, the value of those funeral programs and so much more. And so she says, thank you so very much for sharing these valuable information. Yes, the health history is important and occupation too. Yes. Again, you mentioned health history, and that was one that we really a lot of times don't know. It tends to not be shared. We seem to be so closed about that issue of health. And so thank you for enlightening that and to really bringing it back to the fore. So Gerada, any closing words as we finish off our session right now? I think we're through with all questions.
I just want to thank everybody for attending. This actually creating the information was really wonderful. And it allowed me to share my experience with our health issues. And in speaking to other persons, I think that we tend not to want to share information or keep information where others could access it, particularly about health. So thanks everyone for attending. Thanks.